In this tutorial, we're going to talk a little bit about how to beef up the way your descriptions look on Amazon. There's a tool out there that's called a Blurb. Well, it's Amazon Blurb Preview, but I'll put the link up here on the screen for you in a second. But what it allows us to do is see ahead of time, what our page is going to look like. So, for example, you can see that I have a nice bold item up here on my page, and then I have like an italic but still bold, and just standard text and so on. But every now and then I'm also going to have a little bit of italics in here. I have an underline section which is going to separate each one of my from the bundle, each one of my book series. But I also have the this is bold for each title for each book that's in the series, and so on all the way down. So it allows us to do a bunch of different things, but we're just going to do a few from this list just to show you. Okay, so over here is the Blurb tool. Now at this point, anything that we type up in here is going to show up down here. So if I say hi, okay, you're going to see that I put hi up here, and hi is down here as well. So the first thing we want to do is let's just say that we copied, for fun, let's do this. Let's just copy this over and put it in here. Now at this point, you're going to see there's no styling on this at all. It doesn't look anything like this other than the words. But everything else, I mean, there's some spacing and stuff, but this is not bold, this is not italicized, etc., etc. So I'm going to show you how to do that. If you know basic HTML, you can probably just skip past this video and jump on to the next video that you're interested in. But if you're a little bit lost with HTML and basic coding on text, then this is going to be good for you. But either way, using the Blurb tool is a great way to see exactly what you're going to get before you stick it into the little edit description box of the KDP edit platform, because you're not going to know what that looks like until it's all said and done. And if you use the one that is on the Author Central site, that actually you can run into problems with that one. So I would recommend not going there. I actually ran into a bunch of problems with that one where it wouldn't show up the proper information on that side versus what was coming across, and anytime you update your books it gets set back. It can just be a real pain. So using this tool is fantastic. Now we're going to see a couple of differences. For example, I'll just show you this really quick. In this instance, let's say we do an H1. Oh, I'm sorry, maybe it's H2. Yeah, there we go. And then I close off the H2 over here. Now you're going to notice that this is showing kind of an orange color, and yet over here this is obviously not showing an orange. That's only because Amazon changed their layout, and whoever wrote this tool, which was not me by the way, whoever wrote this tool did not change the layout to represent the same color scheme that Amazon is using. However, we're still going to stick with using the same layouts, which will at least give us this bolded section and so on. So the first thing that you probably notice here is that I put this thing called H2 around this area. This is what's called an HTML tag. And tags actually are pretty simple. The idea behind a tag, let's put this down here and I'll just say hi again. The idea behind a tag is that you have what's called an opening tag and a closing tag. So let's just say we wanted to bold this. This is actually pretty intuitive. You use specific fields that look like this, and then you put the tag inside of it. The idea here is that the likelihood of you putting something like this, for example, inside of your actual written word is pretty low. So having these three items in here, are you likely to type that in? Now you might be if you're trying to describe what this particular thing does and you're putting out a tutorial, but then there's different things that you can do to handle that. For the sake of our argument, the likelihood again of you putting that particular item in your description is pretty low. So that's the idea behind HTML, is find a particular character structure that they can use so you can modify the way text looks with codes that you're not likely to use inside of your actual text in the first place. So what we're going to do here is we have what's called, this is an opening tag. Now the cool thing is that the closing tag is exactly the same except for there's a slash in front of it. So you notice I put over here I have opening tag B, and the closing tag is /B. So that way we always know that if you have something that's open on this side, if you don't close it, watch what happens to the bottom here of the output. The whole thing is bold. So then you know, somewhere along the line I didn't close it. So what you do is you just put in the /b at the end of it, and then now you just have the word hi as bolded there, which is exactly what we want. So if we look down at this section here, we can see a number of things that we can do. For example, what is a BR? Now a BR, you honestly, you don't have to have a closing tag for a BR, but let's see what it does here. And actually, this is how you should write a BR if you're not going to do a closing on it. You just put it straight forward and you just do that. So that's basically saying go ahead and start and close the tag all in one movement, because there's not going to be anything in between this. Okay, but you see what happens is, what is a BR? It's a break. It's a line break. So look down here and you can see that it says hi, and then the letter A, which is right up here, is directly next to it, but we want to have it one down. Now you can just hit the enter key and it'll go down there. But if you wanted to use a tag like it's showing right here, you would do BR. And technically you don't have to close that tag if you don't want to. But it's just a common practice that many people use. I happen to be a web developer and I have a tendency of using it. Actually, I tend to do this. But it doesn't really matter. If you don't want to use it, you don't have to use it. The Amazon tool will accept it. Frankly, I don't even bother to use them at all. I just hit the enter key in the Amazon tool and go with it that way. So I don't even bother using the BR. Okay. Now when we go with an EM, so let's change the B to EM. What that's doing is that's giving us an italicized characters. So that's one thing. You can basically go through each one of these and see what they do, but we're only going to cover a few of them. If you really want to go through stuff, that's cool, but we're only going to cover a few of them. So the first one that I want to cover is H2. Now that's heading style 2. Okay, and you notice it's got this bright orange. Now again, if you come over here, it's not going to be bright orange. But what this is telling us is when we see this in orange here, that means that when it shows up on our actual description page, it will be this big bold item, which is what we want to start out. And you do want to start your descriptions out with something like this. Obviously, it doesn't have to be 60% off the cost or whatever, but you want to start out your descriptions with something that says, hey, look at me, you know, and pull them over to that blurb. So some type of a title that kind of grabs their attention. So let's go ahead then and just get started with that. So we're on the top line, we're going to put H2, and then we're going to go to the end of that line, and we're going to close that tag with H2. So now at this point, we pretty much have the same thing here. But notice something. There's not a big gap between the word individually and not intended for children. But if you notice over here, there is a big gap. So how do I get this to come up one line? Because I don't really want to have this big gap here. The good news is if you recall, we hit enter before. If we hit the backspace key and make it so this is sitting right next to the end of that H2, see what happens down here? So that's pretty cool. That's what we want. Now at this point, we have bold and we have italicized. So first thing we have to do is open a tag that's called bold. Okay, and you notice everything got set to bold. And then we want to make sure that we close that tag. So that way, and this is just something to think about. These things can get lost really quickly because there's so many of these that could happen here. So if, for example, if you said, you know, when we get down to here and we start doing, you know, italicizes in between all of these things, oh man, it can get crazy. So we got to be careful about that. By the way, you don't have to use EM either if you don't want to. You can actually use I for italicize. The Amazon tool supports both. If you see right there, it will support both. So I'm going to actually use I because I'm used to that. But okay, so right after the B, we're going to go ahead and stick in another tag because right now we do have this as bold, but if we go back here, we wanted it to be bold italics. So how do we do that? Now you might think, wouldn't it be great if you could just type IB and it would do it? Unfortunately, it does not do it that way. So what you do is you just go to, again, right before the not, and you just type in another tag. Okay, so now you have a bold and then an italics tag. But so far we've only closed the bold tag. So if you look down here, everything is still in italics. It's not bold because we closed that bold. So we've said between here and here, make this bold. But what we're also saying is between here and eternity, make everything italics because we haven't closed this. So just from a stylistic standpoint, you can do this. Some people do that where they say, well, I opened with a bold, I closed first with a bold, I seconded, yeah, you see what I'm saying. Second, I used an italics, and I closed the italic second. But I tend to do it this way. This way I can say I goes with I and then B goes with B. So it's kind of like, think of it like a line going from one section to the other and then another line going from one section to another. This way I'm not crossing lines and that can get confusing. So I tend to close whatever I open, I close in that order. So if I say I open B and then I open I, then I close I and I close B. So I do it in reverse order, I guess is the best way to put that. Okay, so we have that now, and then we have, as we're coming through here, we start seeing all of these different guys in here. And so let's just say right here, we have Tales from the Land of Ononikin. Now before we were doing full sentences, you know, right here is what we were messing with. But in this case, we only want to highlight this one section. So hopefully you'll find that this is pretty intuitive at this point. So what we're going to do is find that section in our inputs area, and we're going to type the I there, and then we're going to close it at the end of the Ononikin section. And that's it. It's pretty straightforward. So as you can see now down here, we have only that piece is italicized. Everything else is fine. Okay. Now, as opposed to going through and doing a one-to-one and putting italics everywhere that I did it up here, let's just jump down to this section so we can see what to do here, because this one's bold and underlined. So let's see what we got. So this is the Tales from the Land of Ononikin, and we have that bold and underlined. So obviously you know how to do the bolding already. You just do an open B and a closed B. So what would you think would be the next thing? Well, if we look down in here, actually, we find it right here at the end, which is a U. And because if you think about it, B for bold, I for italics, U for underline. Okay, so now everything is underlined down here because we haven't closed that tag. So we go back here, we close the tag, and now we just have Tales from the Land of Ononikin, and that's underlined and bolded just like we have here. Okay, so now we have a quest of undoing. That we need to bold. As you can see, this actually can happen pretty quickly if you start working on this. Now, one of the things I tend to do is I tend to say, I needed this for this title, so I just go up here and I copy it. Then I paste it. Then I have the closed information, and I paste that too. Right? So it makes it a little bit easier to do with this. Now, notice on this one I went, wait a minute, over here, that's just a bold, that's not an underline. That's true. So in this instance, all I was trying to do was showing you was the copy and paste stuff. So in this instance, we don't need the underline. So let's just move that out. And then finally, we're going to do copy the bold and copy the closed bold. And let me get rid of that space. And there we go. So at this point, if we look at this, except for I didn't do all of the italics in here, obviously, if we look at this top part and we look at this top part, pretty much the same. The only difference is obviously is again this is black, not that orange, and that's just because Amazon has changed their style, and this hasn't been updated to reflect that style just yet. So there are many other things you can do in here. For example, let's just say that before Bob the Zombie you wanted to have a line that runs all the way across the screen. Well, there's your line right there, and that was by using what's called a horizontal rule. So again, it's just something that is kind of like the BR that we talked about before. And maybe you want to make sure there's a good space between those two lines. That's how you would do that. So you can do that. You can also say, you know what, this is neat, but I want to have, as opposed to having this as bullet points like, or I'm sorry, as bolded like this, I want to have these as bullet points. You can do that. What you do is you do an unordered list, and then you would do list item, and you notice now that's got a dot next to it. Okay, now I would probably still do the bold, see, like that, and then come down here and do the list item, and then the list item, right? And then at the end of that, now you want to make sure that nothing else is going to be part of an unordered list. So now when we type hi down here, notice that this has been indented because it's all part of this UL, this unordered list. And then if you come down here, we close that UL. And so there you go, down to that point. Now you can also do this, where you say /li, /li, and /li. Now you notice that what it did was it put line breaks in between here. So if you're going to do that, make sure that you hit the delete key so that all of these things are stuck right together, and then that way you have a nice spacing. Technically you don't have to do the /li, but it is considered good practice to close all tags that you open. So it's just something to keep in mind. Now, you can either do that, or I'm sorry, you can do that, but now let's just say that you wanted to do an ordered list. So you change this to an O, and change this to close O. So an ordered list basically just means it's going to put number 1, 2, and 3. So maybe that's the way you wanted to do it, to say, hey, this is book 1, this is book 2, this is book 3. So an OL just means ordered list, which means it's going to be numeric. Okay. So as you can see, there's tons of stuff that you can do in here. You can even do things like larger H1, which is just a larger size. So if we say hi again, and we put in H1, notice that's pretty large. H1, like that, and we close that. So now let's go to H3. That's a little bit smaller. H4, it's even smaller. And you start wondering, well, that just looks like bold text. Each thing is going to have its own Amazon relation to it, though. So these are things that I tend to just avoid. I typically stick with the very basic stuff. I will sometimes consider using unordered lists or ordered lists, but for the most part, I try to stay away from a lot of these things. Now you can do sub, which basically just is going to make something smaller. So let's see, hello, and you notice that what it does is it puts its sub underneath the line a little bit and in a smaller font, right? If you want to say sub, then it's going to be up here. So that's for cool things like if you were doing, for example, trademark, right? You could put that up in this spot, and that'll give it that kind of a feel to it. If you wanted to say, let's say you were doing a price cut or whatever. Let's say today you can get this box set for, let's say, $9.99. And then what you do is you put a dash 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 $7.99 today only, right? So what we can do is up here we type in strike, and then we type strike again, or we're going to close that strike. And then what we'll do is we'll say bold, italicize, close the italicize, close the bold. And now see what we have down here is we have like this strikeout. And so we're showing people who show up today, maybe this is something you want to do for, like, if you're doing a giveaway or something like that, you can put this in your description and show a strikeout, which means people are going, hey, usually this is $9.99, but I'm getting it for $2 off if I act today. Right? So that's just something that you could do from a marketing standpoint, and it's just another thing that's, you know, kind of cool in your repertoire, as it were. And by the way, when you see something like strong, that's the same thing as, almost the same thing as bold. It'll act similarly in the Amazon tool. So play around with this, and then the cool thing is that once you're done, all you have to do is highlight this whole section. You can just do click in there and do Control A or Command A. Right click, copy it, and that's what you're going to be pasting into your KDP edit field for your book. And whatever you see down here is what it should show up when you get to your actual book, when it gets actually published. So this is an excellent tool to use. I will go ahead and put the URL up on the page as well as on the video so you can check it out. And I do highly recommend that you use this. And just, you know, again, whatever you see down here is what's going to end up being there. So play around with this, make sure that you close all of your tags, and try to be very careful about how you're working with these tags and so on, so that you don't end up accidentally, for example, you wouldn't want this, where you were messing around with something and this happened. Now everything is crossed out. So just be very careful about what you're doing here. If you take it slowly and step by step, everything should work out great. So thanks for watching, and I hope this helped you.